Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com. Today we're going to make a chocolate chiffon cake, and this is what we are going to make. As you can see, it's 2 layers of the cake with a layer of Mocha whipped cream in between, and then we're going to cover it all with a rich chocolate glaze. So first, preheat your oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 165 degrees Celsius, and you will need a 2-piece tube pan, and that'd be 10-inch, 25 centimeter, and you want the two pieces to make it so it's really easy to remove the cake from the pan. And don't grease it. We want to leave it ungreased so that as the batter bakes, it will cling to the sides of the pan. And then, first let's do our dry ingredients. You will need 2 cups of sifted cake flour. That means sift the flour first and then measure it into your cup measurements. If you are weighing your ingredients, that will be 200 grams. And we're going to sift that with 1/4 cup, 25 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder. You can use regular unsweetened or Dutch processed, either one. And then you will need 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I like to use the kosher salt. And then you will also need 3/4 cup, that's 150 grams of granulated white sugar. And then we're just going to sift that into a large bowl. I'm just using a strainer. You can actually buy a sifter. Okay. Just going to give that a quick whisk. Make sure that everything's mixed together. And then for our wet ingredients, first thing you do about a ½ hour before you're going to start is separate your eggs. You will need 6 large eggs because it's much easier to separate your eggs when they're cold. And put the yolks in one and the whites in the other, and then cover with plastic wrap. Now, with your whites, you will need the 6 plus 1 extra, so you will need 7 whites and 6 yolks. And what we're going to do is take our yolks and just put those in a bowl, and I'm just using a wire whisk, just break them up a little. And then to that I am going to add 1/2 cup, that's 120 milliliters of a flavorless oil. That means you can use like a corn, a vegetable, canola, safflower, even a light olive oil if you want, because a chiffon cake uses oil different than a butter cake that uses butter. And then we will need some liquid. I'm using 3/4 cup, 180 milliliters of freshly brewed coffee that I let cool to room temperature, or you could use instant coffee. Now, if you don't want to use coffee, you don't like the flavor, then just use water. That's fine. And I'm just going to add that. And then for a little more flavoring, I'm going to add 1½ teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. So that's simple enough. So we're going to leave that, and then we're going to take our whites and we're going to beat those. So just, if you're using a stand mixer like I have here, use your whisk attachment, or you could do it by hand with a wire whisk if you have a strong arm, or you can use a hand mixer. And I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar to those whites right now. You don't have to use that if some people can't find it. It's normally sold in the spice section of your grocery store, and what it does is just helps you stabilize the whites so you don't overbeat them, but you don't absolutely need it. So what I'm going to do now is beat this on medium speed just until it reaches just about to soft peaks. Okay, this looks pretty good. You can see it's just kind of nice, loose. You can start to see, one way you can tell is you can start to see the tracks of your whisk in the whites. So now what we're going to do with the mixer on like medium speed, low to medium speed, is add in gradually 3/4 of a cup, 150 grams of granulated white sugar. And then we're going to continue to beat until you have not quite firm peaks. They're still a little soft. Okay, those look good. Just give it a quick stir, and this is what you're looking for. You know, they're pretty stiff, but they still kind of like droopy. That's what you're looking for. Okay, so now so the first thing we need to do is add our wet ingredient to our dry. So kind of like to make like a well in the center of our dry ingredients, if you can see that here. Let's put that. And then just add the wet into there. See, most of this you can just do it by hand for this recipe. And then just take a wire whisk and just mix it in gently. Make a mess. That's why I'm using a large bowl here. Makes it easier. So, you see what I'm doing? Just give it a good stir so everything's mixed in and it's nice and smooth. If you wanted to, you could use your stand mixer. Okay. So now what we're going to do is, in 3 additions, add our meringue to our batter here. Now we want to fold, don't want to overfold and deflate the meringue. You can either use a spatula or a wire whisk. I do like to, every once in a while, use my spatula to make sure you get down to the bottom of the bowl. Make sure everything's mixed in. And then I'll just add the rest. Beautiful batter. And again, you tend to always have a little of the batter at the bottom that doesn't get completely mixed into that meringue. At least I always find that. I think that's pretty good. So, ungrease tube pan. Pour this in. Okay, so now what I like to do is take a knife or a spatula and just kind of run it through because there tends to be some air bubbles. So let's just break those. Okay, looks good. So now into the oven, depending on your oven, somewhere around 55, 65 minutes. What you want to do is take a wooden skewer and just insert it halfway in the middle of the cake, and it should come out clean. Okay, our chocolate chiffon cake is now done. If you take a long wooden skewer and insert it center, it will come out clean. So chiffon cakes have a tendency to shrink as they cool, and that's why I like to use a tube pan, because you have this center core, and which makes it easy. We can turn it upside down. So if you have some kind of cup or flat bottom, then you have your oven mitts, and we're just going to turn it, put the center core on your cup like that, and then that will prevent it from shrinking. And we're just going to leave that for, say, an hour and a half until the cake is completely cooled. So when I come back, I will show you how to remove it from the pan. So now we're going to remove our chiffon cake from the pan. So just take either a knife, or I've got a flat spatula, and let's run it around the inside here to release the sides. Okay, and then just kind of take your fingers on the bottom and kind of flip it. Now, if you have a cake circle like I have here, one of these cardboard cake circles, you can buy these like cake decorating stores or stores like Michael's, Joann's. I'm just going to flip it right onto there. Otherwise, just put it onto your cake rack, like so. And then we've got to release it from the bottom. So I'm just going to take my, actually I'm going to do my inside core because I forgot to do that before. So just run that, release it from there. Okay, and then I'll put my cake circle. And then just take it and run it around the inside here. You will notice that it's not going to be, your sides and your bottom of your cake are not going to be perfectly beautiful because, as we were saying, the cake does stick as it goes up, as it bakes, so you will get, but we can fix that up. That's why we're going to glaze it. So now, there we have our cake. Now, you could serve it just like this with maybe a sprinkling of cocoa powder or powdered sugar. Very nice, just the way it is. But we're going to make a decorated layer cake. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to cut it in half horizontally. So a really nice, this is a really nice long knife, so you can do the whole cake. So what we're going to do is just take our knife and, about halfway, and I just work it around. You can put it on, if you have one of those turntables that spin, which I guess I should use mine because I do have one, but I'll do it this way so I can show you in case you don't have one at home. And then just kind of run it so it's all the way through, halfway. Okay, and then we're just going to remove I'm going to move this over here, like so. So now we're ready. When we come back, we'll make our chocolate glaze. Okay, so now we'll make our chocolate glaze. You will need a saucepan of simmering water and then a heat-proof bowl, and place in there 6 ounces, that's 170 grams of your favorite semi-sweet chocolate, and just chop it coarsely. And then along with that, add 4 tablespoons, 55 grams of butter, salted or unsalted, either one. And just cut it into small pieces. That way it will melt a little faster. And then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of corn syrup, the light corn syrup, or you can use golden syrup. And we're using the corn syrup because that way, when we store this cake in the fridge, the corn syrup will prevent the glaze from getting hard. So just mix all that, and I'm going to put it over the saucepan, and we're just going to melt everything so it's nice and smooth. Okay, so as you can see, everything is nice and melted. So just take it off of the heat, and then I'm going to add about a tablespoon of, actually I'm using a hazelnut liqueur. You could use a coffee flavored liqueur, a brandy, cognac, or if you don't want to use any alcohol, just maybe add half a teaspoon of vanilla extract, or you don't even have to add anything at all. So just stir that in, and that's done. So what we're going to do is let that cool a bit, and when we come back, we will make our whipped cream filling and finish off our cake. So now for our mocha flavored whipped cream. About 15 minutes before you start, put your mixing bowl and the wire whisk in the freezer and get it nice and cold, because that helps the cream really whip up well. And then you will, what you will need is 1/4 cup, 50 grams of granulated white sugar. Just put that right in your bowl, along with 2 tablespoons, 15 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder. That's regular unsweetened or Dutch processed, either one. 1 teaspoon of instant coffee powder or espresso powder, or if you don't want the coffee flavor, just leave that out. And just a half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then just gonna mix that. And then I'm just going to add maybe a couple tablespoons, because what I want is to make like a paste from your dry ingredients there. So just add a little of your cream. I just want to mix that a little. So what you will need is 1 cup, 240 milliliters of heavy cream or heavy whipping cream, and that's cream with about 35 to 40% butterfat content. Okay, so if you can see that, we just got a nice paste. Just want to make sure that coffee and the cocoa powder's all mixed in. So now what I'm going to do is just slowly pour in the cream, and then turn your mixer on high and just whip it just until it gets stiff peaks. Okay, so now we're at stiff peaks, as you can see. So first, what we want to do is use part of the cream to fill, and then we're going to use the rest to decorate the top. So if you want to measure, it's about 3/4 cup, 180 milliliters. You could put it in your measuring cup, kind of like so. If you want to be exact. I usually just eyeball it. And then what I like to do is put it in a piping bag. I find it easier. And I'm using, for the top, to decorate a open star, pretty big one, as you can see there. So let's put that in a glass, makes it easier. Put like that, and put the cream. Because what we want is, we don't want too much filling, and then it kind of oozes out the side, which you don't want. So I find between 3/4 of a cup and a cup of cream is ample. So if you're using the piping bag, just press it down. If we find it's not enough, we can always add a little more. And then just That's why, as you can see, it makes it a little easier to do it when you use your piping bag. As you can see, I'm using a turntable here. It makes it easy to spin around to decorate. If you don't have one, that's fine. You can just, if you want, you can put your cake on your serving platter right now as you're decorating it. Okay, so get that there, and then you can just take a spatula, back of a spoon. Don't get it too close to your outside edge of your cake, because when we put the top layer, it does kind of compress it a bit. You don't want it coming out the sides. Okay, and then take your top layer, put on top, like so. Get that quite even. There. Okay. Okay, so now just kind of even it up a little, because we're going to pour our glaze over the top now. Okay, so now we have that. Now we have our chocolate glaze. There's a couple ways you can do this. I'm just going to pour it over the top. Like so. Sometimes I don't even put a filling in, and I just use this glaze. It's like, how fancy do you want your cake to be? A lot of times I just have the glaze and pour it over the top and let it just drip down the sides. A little more casual. Okay. So now, what I like to do is just kind of push it over the sides. Just go around, let it drip down the sides. Like I said, we can just leave it just like that. Isn't that beautiful? It's shiny. See, putting that little bit of corn syrup in there just makes it nice and shiny, and it also flows nicely. Now, I must admit, I normally just let it flow, and then that's it. I don't do anything more. But if you want, you could take your knife and see, just smooth out the sides like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Spend as much time as you want on that, and just kind of smooth out the top. Gorgeous. Okay. Now we will finish up by decorating the top with the rest of the cream. And I like this star tip, but again, you can use whatever you like to decorate. Or if you don't even want to, you could just make half the amount of cream and just leave the top, because that glaze is so gorgeous just as it is. You really don't even need this. But we'll make it nice and fancy today. Okay. Just make sure when you're using a piping bag, press it down. Try to get all the air out. Once it starts, and then just twist. Okay, so we'll do some rosettes here. Okay, so I think that looks gorgeous. So what I'm going to do is clean it up a bit, and then what I'm going to do is just put this in the fridge. Normally, I like to, before I serve it, put it in the fridge for maybe at least an hour just to firm up the whipping cream, and that it makes it so much easier to cut. So when we come back, I'll cut a slice. So now we're ready to cut our cake. So just knife, just cut through. And then I like to have a cloth and just wipe between it off. Clean your knife. That way you get a nice clean cut. It's like a sawing motion I find is best. And get it between, I have that cardboard round, so I gotta kind of, and whoop, there we go. Isn't that gorgeous? As you can see, we have the cake with the filling, and we'll give it a try. I like the cream, of course. A little cake and a little chocolate glaze on there. Oh, it's very nice. Very nice mocha flavor, the chocolate, the coffee, cream. It's wonderful. This is really, you can cover and store this in the refrigerator probably for 3 days. I like to bring it to room temperature normally before serving. So enjoy, and until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.